There are players who win games. There are players who win championships. And then there are the rare men who earn something even more difficult to achieve in professional sports. They earn the respect of the people who know exactly how hard the game truly is. Few men understood that better than Patrick Roy. For nearly 2 decades, he stood in the crease against the greatest players hockey had to offer. He faced legends on the biggest stages, survived playoff battles that defined entire careers, and carried the pressure that comes with being one of the most competitive athletes the NHL has ever seen. Fans remember the saves. They remember the Stanley Cups. They remember the confidence, the intensity, and the moments that made Patrick Roy one of hockey's most unforgettable figures. But when the crowds disappear and the trophies become memories, something else remains: respect. Not the kind found in newspaper headlines or television debates, but the kind earned between competitors who spent years testing one another at the highest level. Over the course of his remarkable career, Roy crossed paths with countless stars. Some were teammates, some were rivals, some forced him to play the very best hockey of his life. A select few left an impression that never faded. They were leaders, warriors, champions, and role models whose influence reached far beyond statistics. Looking back today, Patrick Roy can still point to the men who represented everything great about the sport he loved. These are the 5 men he respected most. Patrick Roy was born on October 5, 1965, in Quebec City, Canada. Long before he became one of the greatest goaltenders in NHL history, he was a young hockey fan growing up during an era filled with extraordinary players. Like many boys in Quebec, he spent countless hours watching the game's biggest stars and imagining what it would be like to compete against them one day. Few dreams ever become reality, but Roy's certainly did. When he arrived in the NHL with the Montreal Canadiens, it quickly became clear that he possessed something special. He was fearless under pressure, intensely competitive, and capable of delivering his best performances when the stakes were highest. Over the years, he would win 4 Stanley Cups, earn multiple playoff MVP awards, and build a reputation as one of the most successful postseason goaltenders the sport had ever seen. Yet for all his accomplishments, Roy never viewed greatness as something that existed alone. The NHL Roy entered was filled with remarkable leaders, dominant champions, and players whose influence extended far beyond the scoreboard. Some became opponents he battled year after year. Others were veterans whose careers he admired from a distance. What united them was the way they carried themselves. They competed hard-earned respect honestly and helped define an era that many fans still consider hockey's golden age. As Roy's own legacy grew, so did his appreciation for the men who had inspired him, challenged him, and set the standard for excellence. Looking back now, these are the players who left the deepest impression on him and earned a level of respect that never disappeared. Number 5, Ken Dryden. Whenever Patrick Roy spoke about the great goaltenders who came before him, one name always carried special weight. Ken Dryden was more than a Hall of Fame player. To many young goalies growing up in Quebec, he was the example everyone tried to follow. Long before Roy arrived in Montreal, Dryden had already become one of the most respected figures the Canadiens organization had ever known. What impressed Roy was not simply the championships. Dryden won plenty of those. It was the calmness he brought to the game. In the most intense moments when entire arenas were holding their breath, Dryden always seemed in almost complete control. He never looked rushed. He never appeared overwhelmed. That ability fascinated Roy because playing goaltender in Montreal came with enormous pressure. Fans expected perfection. The media examined every mistake. Dryden handled all of it with remarkable composure. As Roy's own career developed, he began to understand just how difficult that achievement really was. Winning games was hard enough. Becoming the face of hockey in Montreal was even harder. Dryden had managed both. He helped establish a culture where excellence was expected rather than celebrated. Future generations inherited that standard, including Roy himself. There was also a quiet professionalism about Dryden that earned admiration throughout the hockey world. He never needed attention to prove his greatness. His reputation came from preparation, intelligence, and consistency. Those qualities resonated deeply with Roy as he matured into a veteran leader. Years later, after building a Hall of Fame career of his own, Roy never forgot the influence Dryden had on the position. He saw him not only as a legendary goaltender, but as one of the men who showed future generations what true excellence looked like. For that reason alone, Ken Dryden earned a permanent place among the players Patrick Roy respected most. Number 4, Steve Yzerman. Patrick Roy spent most of his career facing great players, but very few earned universal respect the way Steve Yzerman did. In a league filled with superstars, Yzerman stood out because of the way he carried himself. He was talented enough to become one of the highest-scoring players of his generation, yet he never allowed personal achievements to become more important than the team. Roy first came to admire Yzerman during the years when the Detroit Red Wings were fighting to return to championship glory. Every season brought enormous expectations. Every playoff disappointment created more pressure. Many players would have focused on protecting their own statistics and reputation. Yzerman did the opposite. He changed his game, sacrificed offensive numbers, and committed himself to doing whatever was necessary to help Detroit win. That decision left a lasting impression on Roy. Great players are common in professional sports. Selfless great players are much harder to find. Yzerman willingly accepted difficult defensive assignments, played through injuries, and set an example that younger teammates could follow. He led through actions rather than speeches. When teammates saw their captain sacrificing for the team, they naturally wanted to do the same. Roy also understood the burden of leadership. Captains are often praised when things go well and blamed when they do not. Yzerman carried that responsibility for years without complaint. Through success and disappointment, he remained steady. His professionalism never changed. When Detroit finally captured the Stanley Cup, after decades of frustration, Roy was not surprised. He knew how much Yzerman had invested in that journey. The championship felt earned rather than gifted. It was the reward for years of discipline, loyalty, and perseverance. Looking back, Roy respected many great players, but Steve Yzerman represented something unique. He proved that leadership was not about being the loudest voice in the room. It was about setting a standard and living by it every single day. That is why Steve Yzerman remains one of the men Patrick Roy admired most throughout his career. Number 3, Ray Bourque. If Patrick Roy had to describe Ray Bourque in a single word, it would probably be dependable. For more than 2 decades, Bourque represented everything a coach, teammate, and fan could want in a hockey player. He was talented, disciplined, durable, and remarkably consistent. While many stars experienced dramatic highs and lows, Bourque seemed to perform at an elite level year after year without ever changing who he was. Roy spent much of his career watching Bourque control games from the blue line. Opposing forwards knew how difficult it was to get past him. He could shut down dangerous attacks, start offensive rushes, and stay on the ice for enormous amounts of time without appearing tired. What impressed Roy most was how effortless Bourque made everything look. He rarely seemed out of position. He rarely made careless mistakes. He simply did his job better than almost anyone else. But respect is not earned through talent alone. Roy admired the way Bourque carried himself throughout his career. Despite becoming one of the most celebrated defensemen in NHL history, he remained humble and team-oriented. Younger players looked up to him. Veterans trusted him. Opponents respected him. That combination is extremely rare in professional sports. Their relationship took on special meaning when Bourque joined the Colorado Avalanche late in his career. By then, Bourque had achieved nearly everything a player could dream of except one thing: a Stanley Cup championship. Hockey fans everywhere wanted to see him complete his legacy, and Roy understood why. Few players had given more to the sport. During Colorado's championship run, Roy saw firsthand how determined Bourque remained. He worked just as hard as younger teammates, and never expected special treatment because of his reputation. When the Avalanche finally won the Stanley Cup, it felt like one of the most emotional moments in hockey history. For Patrick Roy, Ray Bourque represented the kind of greatness that grows stronger with time. Not because of headlines or statistics, but because of character. He was the type of player every organization dreams of having and every opponent respects. That is why Bourque remains one of the men Roy admired most, both as a competitor and as a person. Number 2, Mario Lemieux. Throughout Patrick Roy's career, he faced many extraordinary players, but only a handful possessed the natural gifts of Mario Lemieux. Whenever conversations turned to the most talented players in hockey history, Lemieux's name was never far away. Roy respected him not only because of what he accomplished, but because of how he accomplished it. Lemieux had a unique ability to make the impossible look routine. His size, vision, creativity, and scoring touch created problems that few opponents could solve. Goaltenders often rely on studying tendencies and anticipating what a player might do next. Against Lemieux, that became incredibly difficult. He could beat a team with a brilliant pass, a powerful shot, or a move that nobody expected. Every shift carried danger. Roy understood better than most how challenging it was to stop elite players. Yet even among hockey's greatest stars, Lemieux seemed different. He could control the flow of a game in ways that were almost impossible to teach. There were nights when he appeared to see the ice a second faster than everyone else. That level of intelligence earned Roy's admiration from the beginning. What elevated Roy's respect even further was Lemieux's resilience. His career was interrupted by injuries and serious health battles that would have ended many careers. There were moments when simply returning to professional hockey seemed unlikely. Yet time after time, Lemieux fought his way back. Not only did he return, he continued performing at an elite level. Roy always respected competitors who refused to surrender when circumstances became difficult. In Lemieux's case, those challenges extended far beyond the rink. Watching him overcome adversity while continuing to inspire teammates and fans left a lasting impression. Their shared connection to Quebec also created a bond of mutual understanding. Both carried enormous expectations throughout their careers. Both represented a hockey culture that demanded excellence. Both understood the pressure that came with being viewed as symbols of the sport. For Patrick Roy, Mario Lemieux was more than a superstar. He was proof that true greatness combines talent with courage. His brilliance made him unforgettable. His perseverance made him worthy of respect. That is why when Roy reflects on the men he admired most, Mario Lemieux stands near the very top of the list. Number 1. Wayne Gretzky. When Patrick Roy looks back on the history of hockey, there is one name that stands above all others. Wayne Gretzky was not simply a great player. He was the player who changed the way the sport was viewed around the world. For Roy, that achievement alone earned a level of respect that very few athletes in any sport have ever received. Roy entered the NHL at a time when Gretzky was already redefining what seemed possible on the ice. Records that had once appeared untouchable were falling year after year. Opposing teams built entire game plans around trying to slow him down, yet he continued producing at a level nobody had seen before. Roy understood how difficult it was to dominate in the National Hockey League. Watching Gretzky do it for so many years was something entirely different. What impressed Roy most was not just the points or the championships. It was Gretzky's understanding of the game. He seemed to know where every player would be before the play developed. He could create opportunities that others never even recognized. Many players had speed. Many players had skill. Gretzky possessed a vision that was truly unique. Their careers crossed paths during some of hockey's most memorable years. Roy experienced firsthand the challenge of facing a player who could change the outcome of a game with a single pass or a single decision. Even when Gretzky was not scoring, he remained the most dangerous player on the ice because he constantly made everyone around him better. Roy also respected the way Gretzky handled the enormous pressure that came with fame. As hockey grew in popularity, Gretzky became the face of the sport. Millions of fans looked to him as the standard for excellence. Despite that attention, he continued to carry himself with humility and professionalism. For many athletes, greatness is measured by trophies. For Roy, true greatness is measured by influence. Gretzky inspired future generations, expanded hockey's reach, and left an impact that continues long after his retirement. His legacy belongs not only to one team or one era, but to the entire sport. That is why when Patrick Roy reflects on the men he respected most, Wayne Gretzky stands at number 1. He was not merely the greatest player Roy ever watched. He was the player who helped define hockey itself. Looking back at this list, it becomes clear that Patrick Roy's respect was never based solely on statistics, championships, or individual awards. Every player on this countdown represented something larger than hockey itself. Ken Dryden represented composure and intelligence. Steve Yzerman represented leadership and sacrifice. Ray Bourque represented consistency and character. Mario Lemieux represented courage and perseverance. Wayne Gretzky represented excellence and influence on a scale the sport had never seen before. What connects these 5 men is not simply that they were great players. Hockey history is filled with great players. What made these individuals special was the way they earned admiration from someone who understood greatness better than almost anyone. Patrick Roy spent his career competing against the very best. He experienced the pressure, the sacrifices, the injuries, and the expectations that come with life in the National Hockey League. When a player like Roy speaks about respect, those words carry weight because they come from experience rather than reputation. Many fans remember hockey through unforgettable goals, dramatic saves, and championship celebrations. Roy certainly experienced all of those moments. Yet as the years pass, memories often shift. The statistics become less important. The rivalries soften. What remains are the people who left a lasting impression through their character, leadership, and dedication to the game. For older hockey fans, these names represent a golden era when legends seemed larger than life and every season created new stories worth remembering. For younger fans, they serve as reminders of the qualities that truly define greatness. Talent may earn attention, but respect must be earned over time. Patrick Roy's career placed him among the greatest players in NHL history. Even so, he never forgot the men who inspired him, challenged him, and helped shape the sport he loved. In the end, perhaps that is the highest compliment one legend can give another. Not that they were famous, not that they were successful, but that they earned his respect and never lost it.